Hello, beautiful people. How's your day been? My name is Olayinka Bosedeojo, and I am the lecturer for Anatomy and Physiology of Farm Animals. Today's topic is female reproductive system. Yes, female reproductive system. What is the significance of reproductive system? Who can guess? Who can take a guess? The significance. Now, reproductive system is the only system in animal that is different between male and female. We can talk about the respiratory system, we can talk about the digestive system. They are similar, irrespective of the sex of the animal. But when we talk about reproductive system, there is a clear distinction between that of the male and that of the female. So the female represents a crucial gateway into practical production of animal protein and its products to meet the need of the ever-growing human population. Now, there is a need to thoroughly understand female reproductive system because this enhances or gives us the opportunity to be able to maximize its potential much better. Now, let's go to the functions of the female reproductive system. What are the functions of the female reproductive system? Number one, it produces the female gamete, which is called ovum, or the plural is also known as ova. Now, the second one is it delivers that ova produced to the site of fertilization, which is the fallopian tube. That is where the male gamete, known as spermatozoa, will meet it for fusion and for fertilization to take place. Then thirdly, it provides an environment or enabling environment for the development and the growth of the embryo after fertilization. And lastly, it expels the fetus when it is capable of surviving outside the mother's body. Let's go to the parts of the female reproductive system. What are the parts of the female reproductive system? Now, we have ovary. Let's list it together. The ovary, yes, the uterine tube, also known as oviduct, the uterus, the cervix, the vagina, the vestibule and vulva, and we also have the broad ligament. Yes, the broad ligament. Now, let's go to the ovary. The ovary represents the primary organ of reproduction in the female animal. The ovary represents the organ of reproduction in the female animal. Okay, now the uterine tube is also known as oviduct, represents the passageway of the ova then to the site of fertilization. Then we talk about the uterus, which is the part which houses the embryo for where the embryo is where the fertilized ova is implanted for development. And the cervix represents the neck of the uterus that permits entry and exit of substances, while the vagina represents the passageway for parturition of during parturition of the fetus. The vestibule and vulva also represent passageway during parturition, and the broad ligament combines these parts together in as a whole. Now, this organ, this particular image represents the part of the female reproductive system. Here we have, I want you to follow my arrow here. We have the ovary, which produces the ova, as we said earlier. After the ovary, we have the uterine horn here. We have the oviducts, the cervix. We have the uterine body, which is also known as the uterus. We have the vagina. We have the vulva. Yes. Now, this particular image represents the reproductive system of a cow. Now, here we have the ovary. This is just like when a cow is slaughtered and you exhume or you remove the ovary as it is. So let's quickly study it together. We have the ovary here. This is the site of ovary. Now we have the oviducts. This is the site of the oviduct, or we call it fallopian tube. We have the uterine body. This is the uterus itself, the uterine body. We have the broad ligament. This portion that literally holds the part together is the ligament. We have the cervix, which is the neck of the uterus, and we also have the external. We have this is the neck of the uterus, which is the cervix, and we have the vulva somewhere. We have the vagina here, which is not expressly shown. Now, this is a more clear image of the ovary. Here, this is the monthly image of the system. Here we have the ovary, and can you see this convoluted or twisted or coiled tube? This is the fallopian tube. Yes, this is fallopian tube. We also have this is the uterine body, and this is the horns of the uterus. Yes, and we have the vagina here, and we have the vulva out there. We have the sex, which is the neck of the uterus here. Now let's go to the functions of the reproductive system or the reproductive organ. The ovary are just like testes in the male. They represent the primary organ of reproduction in the female. They are paired, they are always paired, they exist in twos. That's why we call them paired glands. The ovary is primary because it has two major functions of significance. Number one, it is an endocrine gland. What did I call it? It is an endocrine gland. Endocrine glands are glands that produces a chemical substance known as hormones, and these hormones coordinate the activities in a multicellular organism. An example is reproduction. Now, the hormones or the chemical substance known as hormones, which in the female, which coordinates secondary sex characteristics, known as estrogen. What did I call it? Estrogen. This estrogen is released into the bloodstream directly. Now, the second reason why the ovary is primary organ reproduction is because it produces cell. It is cell producing. We call it cytogenic. And what's the name of the cell that it produces? Yes, take a guess. What is the name of the cell that the ovary produces? Yes, good. It is called ova. And this ova is released from the ovary surface during ovulation. And what is ovulation? Ovulation has to do with the release of a matured ova from the ovary. Now, let's go straight to the anatomy of the ovary. How does the ovary looks like? Now, the ovary has two major divisions, subdivisions. We have the cortex and the medulla. What did I call it? The cortex and the medulla. The cortex represents the outer portion of the ovary, which is covered with tunica albuginea, which is a strong membranous covering that protects the ovary from any negative impact. Now, the medulla represents the portion which is deeper inside, which is highly vascularized. That is, it contains blood vessels. Now, the ova, which is released at the end of the day, starts from the primordial follicle. What did I call it? The primordial follicle. This primordial follicle represents a small arrested oocyte which is surrounded by flattened granulosa cells. Can you see it? Yes, if you follow this arrow, you see this circular purplish substance or ring of cell. We call it flattened granulosa cells. This primordial follicle undergoes development to form primary follicle. What did I call it? Primary follicle. This primary follicle is the second stage of the follicular development. It contains the oocyte initially found in the primordial follicle, which enlarges and the granulosa cells becomes cuboidal in shape, forming a singular layer of cell around the oocyte. Now, this third stage is known as secondary follicle. What did I call it? Secondary follicle. This secondary follicle contains many more ring of granulosa cells which has further proliferated to form multiple layers, and so still surrounding the oocyte. It keeps developing and to form tertiary follicle, which is the fourth stage. This tertiary follicle contains more ring of granulosa cells now infused with a portion known as antrum. This antrum contains fluid which literally gradually pushes the oocyte to a corner. And now this develops further to form the matured follicle. What did I call it? Matured follicle. You can see the oocyte smaller in size, and the ring of follicular development is surrounding it as well, while we have the antrum becoming bigger. This antrum is said to contain estrogenic granules, which contains the estrogen that helps to maintain the secondary sex characteristics in the female animals. Now, after this follicle has reached maturity, it undergoes ovulation. What did I call it? Ovulation. Who can still remember what ovulation is? Ovulation has to do with release of matured ova during in a mature female animal or during estrus. Now, after the ovum has ovulated or literally ruptured to release the ova, the cells still surrounding that portion of which the matured follicle is organizes themselves and adds fat to in between to form developing corpus luteum. This developing corpus luteum gradually develops further to form corpus luteum. This corpus luteum is also an endocrine gland, that is, it supplies or produces a hormone known as progesterone. What did I call the hormone? Progesterone. What does progesterone do? Who can take a guess? What does progesterone do? Progesterone helps to maintain pregnancy or sustain pregnancy in case there will be a possible pregnancy after and then a possible breeding or release of sperm cell from the male. The initial stage of the pregnancy will be maintained by the progesterone produced by or from the corpus luteum. This corpus luteum degenerates to form corpus albicans. What did I call it? Corpus albicans. This corpus albicans does not go completely away. It stays there such that literally, if you want to know how many times a female animal has ovulated, you can count this corpus albicans. It looks like scar that doesn't go away. So you can count it and then you will know that how many times the ovulation has taken place in that female animal. Now, we talked earlier about ovarian cortex and the medulla. That is, we said the ovarian cortex is a portion that is made up of connective tissue and functions functions as a covering of the as the outer portion of the ovary. That is, it's made up of dense layer of connective tissue which is surrounded by the tunical abugenia, and also responds to hormonal stimulation. Then the ovarian medulla is the inner portion which is highly vascularized, as said earlier, which is made up of blood vessels, lymphatic vessels, and nerves. Okay, now we have talked briefly about the stages of follicular development. We talked about the primordial follicle, we talked about the primary follicle, the secondary follicle, the tertiary follicle or the antral follicle, as well as the dominant follicle, just prior to ovulation. So the follicular development undergoes these 5 stages prior to ovulation, which is the release of a matured ova into the oviduct. Now, the uterine tube. The uterine tube is another portion of the organ of the female reproductive system, which are also paired and are convoluted, as shown in the image revealed. This convoluted tube conducts ova. It enhances transportation of the ova released during ovulation. It also conducts sperm cell from each portion that pass through the uterus. And the uterine tube is the site or the usual site of fertilization of the ova by the sperm cell. And it has a funnel-shaped part which is known as infundibulum. What did I call it? Infundibulum. This infundibulum receives the ova during ovulation to avoid it being the incidence of it falling off. Now, this beautiful image shows the fallopian tube, also known as uterine tube or oviduct. This is the infundibulum, which is like funnel or finger-like projections, which receives the ova when it's coming from the ovary. This is the ovary. So during ovulation, when ova is released, this literally catches it and transports it to the fallopian tube where fertilization takes place. Now, the uterus. The uterus consists of the body, the cervix, which is also the neck of the uterus, and 2 horns known as the uterine horn. The uterus is made up of perimetrium, which is the outer portion of the uterus, and we have the myometrium, which is the highly muscular middle layer, as well as the endometrium, which is the innermost highly glandular layer, which has different thickness and vascularity depending on the hormonal changes in the ovary and during pregnancy stage. This endometrium produces a colloidal fluid known as uterine milk. This uterine milk sustains the growing embryo prior to the time placenta will develop. Now, the cervix of the uterus is projected caudally into the vagina. The cervix is literally closed except during two periods, during estrus to permit swimming in of the spermatozoa into the through the uterus, and as well as during parturition to permit the expulsion of the fetus out to the external parts. Now we have different variations in the uterus. Now we have bipartite type, we have the biconnuate, we have the duplex, and we have the simplex. Now the bipartite uterus is the type that have two separate uterine horns which now empties into a single cervix, meaning that we have two separate uterine horn and one cervix. That is the type found in cattle, sheep, and horses. Now the second type is called biconnuate uterus. This biconnuate uterus consists of elongated horns that are fused at the small uterine body. The characteristics of this biconnuate is that the horns are elongated and they now have small uterine body which fuses them, and they look like heart shape. An example is the animals where it can be found are the sow and the bitch. Now let's go to the duplex uterus. What type of uterus is called duplex? This type is the one that has two separate uterine horn and two cervices, such that two embryos can be transferred to the same female at the same time. This is found in the female rabbits. And lastly, we have the simplex uterus. What did I call it? Simplex uterus. This simplex uterus consists of a single chambered uterus with no separation between the horns. The horns are joined together like one, and they have a single chambered uterus. This is majorly found in human. Now, vagina. Vagina is the portion of this reproductive tract that lies between the pelvis cranially and the vulva caudally. That is, between the pelvis, between the uterus and the vulva, we have the vagina. The vulva is the external part, the uterus is the inner part, that is the uterus. So in between these two, we have the vagina. What does the vagina do? Number one, it represents a birth canal for the delivery of the fetus at parturition. That is, at parturition, the fetus passes through this passage before there's parturition. Then it also acts as a shirt that receives the penis during copulation. In animals, we call it breeding or cervix. Now, again, this is the vagina. Can you see? We have the cervix, you have the uterus, here, and we have the cervix here, we have the vulva here. So in between the uterus and the vulva, we have the vagina, and it's like a passage. So as the fetus is coming out during parturition, as it passes through the uterus, it passes through the cervix, then goes through the vagina, then to the vulva, then out of the female body. Now, we have the broad ligament. The broad ligament is a sheet of tissue that supports the uterus, the ovaries, and the fallopian tube. Just like a sheet of muscle or tissue that joins them together. It is made up of peritoneum, which contains nerves and blood vessels. Now, the vestibule and the vulva. The vestibule is between the vagina and the external genitalia. Now, the vestibule is just like tied in the inner part after the external genitalia. As you go into the female genitalia, the walls that you see in between the two portions is called the vestibule. The vestibule is demarcated by external urethral orifice. That is, the urinary and the reproductive tract both share this vestibule. That is, fetus comes out through the vestibule, also the urine passes through it. This vestibule contains mucous membrane, which is abundant in mucous gland. That is, it produces mucus during estrus and during breeding. Now, the vulva. The vulva is the external genitalia of the female, which comprises of the right and left labia. If you see a female animal pass, when you check the caudal part, the external genitalia, that portion that you can see outside is called the vulva. The vulva has the left side and the right side, and it is now joined. It has a midline which joins it at the dorsal and the ventral portion. That is, it's under and at the top and the down. Then this ventral commissure has something like a protuberance, which is pendulous, and it conceals the clitoris. This clitoris is an erectile tissue that has the same embryonic origin as the penis in the male. Now, the penis has roots, that is something that is holding it to make it firm and standing. Also, this clitoris has two roots, or call it two crura, two roots, or two bodies. And it also has the head, which is known as the glans. The same way the penis has the head, which is also known as glans. So we have glans penis, we also have glans clitoris. This clitoris is covered by a particular tissue known as stratified squamous epithelium. That is, it has many layers and it's square. It has a form. This tissue has a square. They are square in shape, and it's also well supplied with sensory nerve endings. Thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate your attention, and you are well appreciated for your time. Till we meet again, thank you so much, and God bless you.